Hey everyone, this is Callie. Thanks so much for being here today. I am sharing a framed peony card using some Alex Syberia Designs products and hope you enjoy it. This particular suite of products is called Gorgeous Peonies and it comes in a stamp set, hot foil plate, dies, and coordinating stencils. I just love all the options. And of course, on days when you don't feel like turning on the hot foiling machine, you can just stamp and emboss for a similar look. There are 6 layers to the stencil set, so there are lots of details to be added. I'm going to be hot foiling today, so I'm just getting my Glimmer hot foil machine ready here, and the color of foil that I'm going to be using is called Pewter. I love that it's not too bright of a color. It's kind of muted, but it still provides that foil shine. So I've cut a piece to match my A2 card panel, and I'm just sandwiching it all up and getting it ready to go as my hot foil machine heats up. And once it's ready, I'm going to undock it, run it through my die cutting machine, and redock it. And you'll see here when I reveal the foil, everything foils so beautifully, and I just love these peony images and the foliage. And that foil, I just love that foil. It's kind of black, but kind of gold, depending on the light that it's shining in. So I just really love that foil color. The next step here is to stencil and add color. So I'm using my Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Mat. This is the original size that fits into a standard Misty, but can also be used as a standalone product since it's got a great tacky surface for holding down your projects and is going to be perfect for holding my paper and stencil in place while I add 6 different layers of color for this stencil set. I've got my first layer here ready to go, and the ink colors that I'm going to be using is a combination of orange and pinks. I kind of wanted a blend of orange to pink, but also introduce that naturally occurring coral color. So for this most open layer, I'm just using a very light hand with oranges at the top of each of the flowers and then pinks at the bottom. So once I'm done adding just a really light layer, I'm going to lift this layer up and add my second layer. And I'm going to be using the same colors in Melon and Rhubarb from Simon Says Stamp. And this time I'm just going to add a slightly heavier hand. So that way those details from the second layer stencil will still show through, but it's not going to be too much of a contrast. For my third stencil and the final detail layer of the flowers, I'm going to be using different colors. I'm going to be using Cheeky and Punch. These are a few shades darker in color and are really going to bring out those details of this layer and complement the previous 2 colors from the first 2 layers that we stenciled. Notice too that these colors are a bit more vibrant, so when I lift away the stencil, this layer is going to be really eye-catching. So now that I'm done with the flowers, I'm going to move on to the foliage. Again, I'm using 2 shades of each color. That first color is going to be a very light hand, and then that second layer uses that same color in Cabbage and adding a heavier hand. And then for the final layer, the more detailed layer of the leaves, I'm going to use the Artichoke color, which is a darker color. And it's true that I could have used 3 different ink colors, but I find that it's easier for me to control how much color I put down. So if I wanted a second layer to be heavier handed, I can control that. So sometimes it's not necessary to add another color. Okay, so now I'm going to die cut my images. And did you notice that the stamp set, hot foil plate, stencil, and even the die is all connected? I absolutely love that, and it makes everything so convenient. Okay, for the background, I just wanted some texture, so I die cut a panel using the Lattice cover die in white. Then to frame my images, I'm using a nested domed arch frame, and I die cut that from matte champagne cardstock. Like the pewter foil that I used on the images, it's very intentional because I didn't want it to be too bright of a color. I love the matte gold cardstock, but for this particular card, I wanted something a little bit more subtle on the shine. So without adhering anything down, I am roughly adding my images inside that nested dome arch frame just to lay everything out and make sure I'm happy with the positioning. And when I'm happy with how everything is laid out, I'm going to use a regular dome arch die, and I'm going to lay that right inside that frame. Then I'm going to use Glad Press and Seal, and I'm going to press it into all of those floral and foliage images as well as that die, and it will pick it all up at once, and the die is going to die cut those images and cut off the excess perfectly so that my images will fit inside the frame later when I'm ready to attach it to my card. So now I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine just as is, and it's going to cut the excess off around, and you can see where it's done that. Now I can go ahead and attach this frame to a card base, and as I said earlier, I just wanted some texture in the background. This part is not necessary, but it does add some texture and a bit of interest to your card. Next, I'm going to glue down my arch frame here, and then for the actual flowers inside the dome, I'm going to use some 3D foam squares. These are the regular height squares because I really wanted some dimension. We already have some texture in the background, so dimension is going to be even better. I'm using the regular size as well as the smaller squares to fit into the smaller areas. Then I'll position it right over the frame. Everything is still on that Glad Press and Seal sheet, so everything is being held in place just perfectly. And once I'm happy with positioning and I've pressed everything down, I can now peel back that glass press and seal. And carefully, because I don't want it to strip the foiling, I am just going to lift away carefully, and then as you can see, all the die cut and excess pieces around that frame are still on the Glad Press and Seal, and I can remove that and reuse that Glad Press and Seal for another project. Everything looks beautiful. The only thing I need to do now is to work on a sentiment. I'm using the Expressing Gratitude sentiment set. And like the stamp set that we used in this suite, everything is attached on one stamp. So I can stamp all of these wonderful sentiments one time and have plenty to use for next time. I am stamping this with a clear embossing ink, so I'm preparing my panel with some anti-static powder, and then I'll stamp it with my clear embossing ink and emboss it with gold embossing powder. There is a coordinating die that will die cut all of these sentiments out at once, but I don't have that. But I'll go ahead and link it below for you in case you're interested. So I'm finishing up here by heat setting my gold embossing powder, and then I'll just trim out a sentiment that I want using a hand trimmer. Okay, so I have my sentiment cut down, and I'm just going to apply it directly over my peonies. There's plenty of dimension from all the foam tape we used on these images, so applying it directly over the flowers is just fine. And that finishes my card. And while I'm doing this voiceover, it just occurred to me that I did not add any gems or sequins to this. I don't know what I was thinking when I was finishing up this card, but I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed the tips and tricks that you may have learned along the way. If you're interested in any of the products that I used, everything will be linked below as well as on the coordinating blog posts. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.